Hey, welcome to our channel. Make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss our latest content.
From a very young age, I learned that dreaming about love was a luxury for people whose refrigerators were already full. My childhood was a tapestry woven with the threads of absence, the absence of food, of stability, of the quiet hum of a home not humming with anxiety. I remember the hollow echo of the refrigerator door closing on empty shelves, a sound that became the soundtrack to my youth. I'd press my cheek against the cold, white metal and pretend I wasn't hungry. A small, silent performance to keep the worry from deepening the lines around my mother's eyes. She was a woman built of broken promises and loose change. The sharp knock of a neighbor demanding late rent was as familiar to me as a lullaby. Every night, the soft clink of coins being counted on the kitchen table was our family's final prayer, a desperate calculation to see if tomorrow's survival was affordable. And through it all, one phrase was repeated like a mantra, a survival anthem passed from a tired mother to a fearful daughter. Marry a man with money, Elara. Marry someone who can take care of you. Love doesn't pay the bills. I didn't know what love was, but I knew fear intimately. The fear of a winter coat that was too thin, of a stomach that ached with emptiness, of seeing my own reflection and finding my mother's exhausted gaze staring back. That fear became my compass. From my first tentative high school dates to my more serious relationships in college, I judged every potential partner through its lens. A man with a 5-year plan was intriguing. A man with a steady job was a prospect. A man with a rising career was a target. The artists, the musicians, the dreamers living from one gig to the next, they were beautiful, fleeting distractions, but I pulled away from them as if their instability were a contagion. This wasn't vanity. It was a survival instinct, honed over years of watching my friends fall for passionate, penniless romantics, only to see them return home, their hearts full of poetry and their bank accounts drowning in red ink. I swore it would be different for me. I wanted a life where the mail brought magazines, not overdue notices. I wanted to open a refrigerator and be faced with choices, not emptiness. I wanted to never again have to master the art of smiling while panic clawed at my throat. At 29, I met Graham. He was a civil engineer, a man who saw the world in blueprints and solid foundations. He wasn't the type to write poems or surprise me with flowers for no reason, but his presence was a steady, comforting weight. He spoke in clear, declarative sentences, and, most importantly, he always kept his word. When I met him, the tight knot of anxiety I had carried in my chest since childhood began to loosen. It was a profound, soul-deep sense of relief. He had a solid job at a prestigious firm, his own apartment with a view of the city skyline, and a future plan that included a family, biannual vacations to financially sensible destinations, and a retirement portfolio that was already robust. When he proposed a year later, holding out a ring with a diamond as clear and flawless as his life plan, I said yes without a flicker of doubt. It felt less like a choice and more like a destination I had been walking toward my entire life. It was as if my mother's voice had guided me straight to this moment, to this man, to this safe and quiet harbor. The first few months of our marriage were exactly as advertised. Calm. Graham's predictability, which might have bored another woman, was my comfort. We made grocery lists on a shared app. We set up budget spreadsheets with color-coded categories. We planned our annual goals in the first week of January. Bills were never late. The car was serviced on schedule. The house was a sanctuary of quiet, clean, functional order. There were no fights, no loud noises, no surprises. It was everything I thought I wanted. But time has a way of turning comfort into confinement. What once felt like safety began to feel like a suffocating routine. The days blurred into a beige watercolor of sameness. Our conversations circled the same predictable topics: investments, home maintenance, his project deadlines, my responsibilities at the marketing firm. There was no room for the unexpected, no space for a spark to catch fire. A strange discomfort began to bloom inside me, a weed in my perfectly manicured garden, and I struggled to give it a name. I started to engage in small acts of rebellion, tiny tremors to see if I could shake the foundation. I'd show up 15 minutes late to our dinner reservations, feigning traffic. I'd forget to pick up the dry cleaning, just to see if his reaction would be anything other than mild, practical redirection. But Graham remained unchanged. His response was always logical. You should set a reminder on your phone for the dry cleaning next time, honey. He assumed everything was fine because, in his world, if the system was running smoothly, then everything was fine. I tried to inject some life, some chaos, into our conversations. I'd share a funny, dramatic story from work or try to talk about my feelings, my anxieties, my dreams. Graham would listen patiently before responding with practical advice. Once, after I confessed to feeling a strange sense of melancholy, he suggested, "Have you tried making a list of what's bothering you? We could categorize the items and brainstorm solutions." The suggestion, offered with genuine kindness, only made me feel more profoundly alone, a creature speaking a language he could not comprehend. Gradually, I began to miss something I couldn't quite define. It wasn't just passion or desire in the physical sense. It was the electric hum of possibility, the feeling that something new could happen at any moment. I started watching other couples on the street, couples laughing loudly, couples arguing with fiery gestures, couples clinging to each other as if the world might end. I found myself wondering if I had chosen a life that was too safe, so safe it had become empty. My mother's words echoed in my mind. Love doesn't fill your stomach. But a new, dangerous question began to form in response. When your stomach is full, what fills the rest? The man's name was Ronan. The meeting was unremarkable, the kind of mundane incident that happens 1,000 times a day. I was at the market, a routine trip to restock our meticulously organized pantry. Reaching for a box of pasta on a high shelf, my tote bag slipped from my shoulder, spilling its contents: a novel, my keys, a tube of lipstick across the linoleum floor. Before I could even bend down, someone else was already there, gathering my things. Looks like this cart has a mind of its own, he said, handing me the lipstick with a small, effortless smile. He wore faded jeans and a plain gray t-shirt, but there was an energy about him, a relaxed casualness that felt foreign and captivating. He didn't just hand back my things and walk away. He leaned against his own cart and made a casual comment about the terrible music playing over the store's speakers. I laughed, not because the joke was particularly witty, but because the interaction felt so unscripted. It was a real laugh, not the polite, measured one I so often used in my life with Graham. His name was Ronan, he said. He didn't seem to measure his words or plan his sentences. He talked like time was stretchy, like there was space for any topic, no matter how pointless. When I finally said I had to go, he asked if I lived nearby. Without thinking, I said yes. The first time I saw him again, at a corner cafe a few days later, I told myself it was a coincidence. The second time, walking in the park near my office, I called it happenstance. But the third time, when he waved at me from that same cafe table as if we were old friends, it felt like fate was testing me. I hesitated for only a moment before sitting down. That first coffee turned into a 2-hour conversation. Ronan talked about music, about a backpacking trip through Southeast Asia, about a ridiculous memory from his childhood. He asked me questions not about my schedule or our financial goals, but about the book I was reading, about what I used to dream of being when I was a kid. Most strikingly, he listened. He listened like he was genuinely trying to understand the person behind the answers, not just collecting data. I found myself laughing again, a deep, genuine laugh about things I hadn't realized I still found funny. That conversation unlocked something inside me. For days, I replayed every detail of our meeting. I started finding excuses to walk by the cafe. When I mentioned offhandedly that I loved old black and white films, he showed up the next day with a DVD of Casablanca. A borrowed gift, he said with a charming grin. When I hesitated to take it, he added, I just wanted an excuse to see you again. My heart beat differently then, a frantic, unfamiliar rhythm. How long had it been since anyone had cared about the movies I liked? Our connection grew with a startling speed, as if there was an urgency to every exchange. Random texts started appearing on my phone throughout the day: a joke, a photo of a strange cloud, a song with lyrics he thought I'd appreciate. I started smiling at my phone in the middle of a work meeting. I began leaving the house with more care, choosing clothes that made me feel beautiful, not just appropriate. I was starting to see myself through his eyes, and I saw someone desirable, interesting, alive. The first touch was light, an accidental brush of his fingers against mine as he handed me a coffee. The distance between us shrank with each meeting. Then, one afternoon as we said goodbye on a quiet side street, he leaned in and kissed me. It was a quick, soft kiss, but it felt like it had been waiting to happen since the moment he picked up my fallen lipstick. In that moment, the thin curtain separating my two worlds tore wide open, and I willingly stepped through. Crossing that line was less of a fall and more of a surrender. The feeling after that first intimate moment with Ronan was a chaotic cocktail of emotions: exhilaration, guilt, euphoria, shame, and a strange, profound sense of relief, like collapsing after carrying something too heavy for too long. A sane person would have stopped, pulled back, and dealt with the wreckage in their primary life. I did the opposite. I clung to it. My excuse, the one I whispered to myself in the dark, was always the same. With Ronan, I felt alive. He noticed things Graham never did: a new haircut, a subtle shift in my mood. He reacted to my ideas with genuine enthusiasm, not calculated analysis. He talked about living in the moment, taking risks, and not wasting time trying to control every outcome. I drank down his philosophy like a woman who had been dying of thirst. The lies became routine, and I was horrified by how easily they came to me. I created an entire fictional social life. A book club that met on Tuesdays, a yoga class on Thursdays, dinners with a friend from college who, in reality, had moved to another state 2 years ago. I crafted stories with surprising detail, populating my fake evenings with funny anecdotes and minor dramas. The more I pulled away from my life with Graham, the more I felt that this new version of myself, the vibrant, desired, risk-taking woman, was the truer one. Ronan became the embodiment of everything I was missing. Impulse, desire, freedom, mistakes. His presence was an addiction, an instant escape from the suffocating predictability of my marriage. One afternoon, he texted me, "Meet me at the old observatory in an hour. Don't ask why." I left work with a flimsy excuse about a dental emergency, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. We spent the evening looking at the stars through the massive telescope, and later, made love in his car under that same blanket of stars. It was reckless and irresponsible, and I had never felt more vibrant. I'd come home to Graham, who would be paying bills or watching a documentary on structural engineering. The contrast was jarring. My two lives were so completely separate, they felt like they belonged to different people. With Graham, I was a partner in a well-run corporation called Our Life. With Ronan, I was just Ilara, a woman with desires and secrets. The strangest part was that even as I fell deeper into my affair, I never seriously considered leaving Graham. In my deluded mind, I wasn't choosing between two men. I was choosing to have two lives. I wanted Ronan's passion, but I also wanted Graham's stability. I wanted the full refrigerator, the paid-off mortgage, and the safe future, but I also wanted the stolen kisses and the secret adventures. I told myself I deserved this burst of novelty after years of being the organized, controlled, perfect wife. Ronan was my secret reward for following the rules for so long. I didn't realize that each lie was a brick I was using to build my own prison, that every justification was a crack in the foundation of the very life I was so desperate to keep. A man like Graham doesn't operate on loud emotions. He operates on data, and the data was starting to point to a conclusion he could no longer ignore. I was too self-absorbed in my double life to notice the subtle shifts in him at first. The way he grew quieter during dinner, the way his eyes would follow me a little too long when I was getting ready to go out for one of my book club meetings. He stopped asking for details about my evenings. He just watched. The storm broke on a Tuesday night. I came home late, smelling faintly of Ronan's cologne, which I had tried to mask with perfume. I had a well-rehearsed story about a friend's emotional crisis ready on my tongue, but the moment I walked in, I knew something was wrong. The house was too still. Graham was sitting in his armchair in the living room, the space illuminated only by the cold blue light of his open laptop. "Hi," I said, my voice sounding unnaturally cheerful. "Sorry I'm so late. Sarah was having a complete meltdown about." "Sit down, Ilara," he said. His tone wasn't angry. It was calm, steady, and utterly devoid of emotion. That calmness terrified me more than any shouting ever could. I sat on the edge of the sofa opposite him. "What's going on?" He didn't answer. He simply turned the laptop screen toward me. The video started playing. It was from a camera angled down from the corner of the living room ceiling. It took my brain a few seconds to process what I was seeing. It was me. From last Thursday afternoon. I watched myself unlock the front door and let Ronan inside. I watched us talk, laugh. I watched myself lean in and kiss him, right there, in the home Graham had built. Then I watched us disappear down the hall toward the bedroom. The blood drained from my face. A strangled noise escaped my throat. I tried to speak, to stammer out an explanation, a denial, anything, but my words caught in my throat. Graham remained frozen, his eyes fixed on my face, watching my reaction without blinking. When the video ended, he closed the laptop with a sharp, final click. "The marriage is over," he said, his voice as flat and hard as concrete. "There's no room for discussion. No justifications, no promises to change." He stood up. "The house belonged to me long before we were married, as you know. I need you to pack your things and leave. Tonight." Eagle. Tears finally broke free, hot and shameful, streaming down my face. "Graham, please," I begged, reaching out for his arm. "We can talk about this. We can fix this. I can explain." He pulled his arm away as if my touch had burned him. "No, respect is something that, once broken, doesn't get fixed. It just vanishes. And you have lost mine." He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes, not anger, but a vast, empty finality. As I stumbled upstairs in a daze to pack a suitcase, my world imploding in silence, Graham picked up his phone. He scrolled to my mother's contact information, attached the video file, and pressed send. No caption, no message, just the file. For the past 2 years, he had been quietly sending my parents a monthly sum to help keep their small hardware store afloat. He knew they relied on it. He knew what this video would mean. Minutes later, as I zipped up a bag filled with a random assortment of my belongings, my phone began to vibrate incessantly on the bedside table. My mom, then my dad, then my mom again. I ignored it, but I already knew. The foundation I had so carefully built my life upon had just been dynamited. When I came downstairs, dragging my suitcase, Graham was holding the front door open. He stepped aside, his face an impassive mask. He didn't say another word. The moment I stepped out into the cold night air, he closed the door behind me. The quiet, definitive click echoed the sound of my life breaking in two. Returning to my parents' house was like traveling back in time to a life I had fought desperately to escape. My father was waiting in the garage, his face a thundercloud. He didn't wait for me to get out of the car. "Ungrateful," he shouted, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. "You are a disgrace to this family." He was a good man, the best man you could have ever hoped for. My mother stood in the doorway, weeping. "How could you, Ilara? After everything he's done for us, for you?" I tried to explain, sobbing, trying to articulate the emptiness, the confusion, the spiraling loss of control, but my words were meaningless against the raw, undeniable evidence of the video. My father wouldn't hear it. "You wanted to live like a grown-up, making your own reckless choices?" He spat. "Fine, then you can support yourself like one. You're on your own." That night, I slept in my old teenage bedroom, surrounded by faded band posters and dusty trophies that felt like relics from another person's life. The abyss I had carved with my own hands was deeper than I could have ever imagined. I hadn't just lost a husband, I'd lost my family's respect, their support, my home, my stability. I sent a desperate, rambling text to Ronan. Then another. I called him twice. The calls went straight to voicemail. The messages remained unread. The man who had whispered promises of living a life without rules had vanished the moment reality demanded payment for our fantasy. The days that followed were a brutal education in humility. The privileges I had taken for granted, new clothes, organic groceries, a subscription to every streaming service, disappeared overnight. I needed a job, any job. I handed out resumes at clothing stores, coffee shops, and stationery stores. In some places, the hiring managers recognized me. "You're the one who was married to that engineer, right?" The whispers and sideways glances were a constant reminder of my public disgrace. A week later, I landed a job as a clerk at a small household goods store. The pay was barely enough to cover gas and my personal expenses. The owner was perpetually annoyed, and the hours dragged endlessly. My mother would leave a plate of food for me some nights, a silent offering of pity. My father barely spoke to me. I overheard him telling my mother one evening, his voice loud enough for me to hear from the top of the stairs, "She destroyed everything, and now she sleeps under my roof like she's the victim." I swallowed the humiliation. It was my new diet. One quiet afternoon, just as I was about to close the store, the bell on the door chimed. It was Thea, Graham's sister. She was a nurse, and she had a way of looking at you that suggested she could see right through to the bone. My throat went dry. I braced myself for a storm of anger, of contempt. She walked calmly to the counter, picked up a dish towel, and looked me directly in the eyes. Her expression was unreadable. "He forgave you," she said, her voice soft. I just stared, unable to process the words. She continued, "What you did, it broke him for a little while. But Graham chose to move on. He's not going to come looking for you. He's not going to carry hate for you. He just let it go. He let you go." Those words, delivered without malice, hit me harder than any scream. I had imagined his silence as a strategy, a period of angry processing. I had held on to a sliver of hope that, someday, we might be able to talk. But what Thea delivered was not an opening, it was a final, sealed closure. He had chosen to forgive me, not because he still loved me, but because he didn't want to carry the weight of me anymore. I was no longer significant enough for his anger. My hands shook as I processed her payment for the dish towel. After she left, I locked the front door, retreated to the dusty stockroom in the back, and cried. I finally realized that the real punishment wasn't my father's yelling or Ronan's cowardice. It was Graham's maturity. It was the dignified way he chose to release me without needing to hurt me back. It was like being severed from my own life by a blade made of respect. A few weeks later, an envelope was lying on my bed. No return address, no name on the back, just my name on the front, in Graham's firm, steady handwriting. For a long time, I just held it, the crisp paper feeling impossibly heavy in my trembling hands. Finally, I found the courage to open it. The first sentence hit me like a physical blow. He wrote not like a wounded husband, but like a detached observer who had already moved far beyond everything that had happened. "Ilara, I'm not writing this to judge you. I've come to understand that we all live according to the ghosts that haunt us. I knew from the beginning that you were afraid of poverty, afraid of ending up like your mother. I understood that when you looked at me, you weren't looking for a lover, but for a shield. Even so, I chose to stay. I chose to try and build something solid on unstable ground, hoping that security could eventually become a foundation for love. The hardest part came at the end of the single page. I have to admit my own mistake in all of this. The truth is, I knew even before we were married that you didn't love me the way I loved you. I saw it in the small things, the way your touch was often distant, the lack of curiosity you had about my inner world, the polite, almost robotic nature of your affection. But I believed that over time, you might learn to love me. I thought stability and kindness could awaken something genuine in you. My mistake was underestimating the immense weight of an empty heart. I don't blame you anymore, but I no longer feel anything for you except a strange sense of gratitude for the lesson. Thank you for showing me that loving someone also means letting them go before they destroy themselves trying to save you. I sat on the edge of my creaking twin bed for hours, holding that single piece of paper as if it weighed 1,000 pounds. He saw it all. He had always seen it. He had seen my fear, my transactional affection, my hollow heart, and he had loved me anyway, hoping his love would be enough to fill me. I had destroyed the one man who treated me with more respect and understanding than I ever thought I deserved. And now, even after I had betrayed him in the most intimate way, he was the one delivering the final word, and that word was forgiveness. A forgiveness so complete that it erased me from his life entirely, leaving no scars, no anger, no trace. It was the definitive end. And all that remained of me in that moment was the reflection in the dusty mirror of my childhood room. A woman who had mistaken comfort for love and stability for happiness. A woman who had traded a quiet, dependable warmth for a fleeting, reckless fire, not realizing that some risks don't just have a price, they cost you everything you are. And for the first time since it all began, I dared to look at myself, truly look, without flinching or looking away, because there was no one else left to fool.